What if everything you thought you knew about the dawn of civilization was a lie? We've all been told the same story. First, humans invented agriculture. Then, they settled down, built villages, and only thousands of years later did they build grand temples for complex religions. It's a neat, comfortable story. But what if it's completely backwards? What if the first great act of civilization wasn't building a farm, but a cathedral? Buried for millennia under a man-made hill in the heart of Turkey lies a secret so profound it's forcing us to tear up the history books and start over. It's a temple, so ancient and impossibly complex it simply shouldn't exist. Built a mind-shattering 11,500 years ago, it is 6,000 years older than Stonehenge and predates the Great Pyramids by 7,000 years. It was constructed by people who supposedly lacked every single building block of civilization. No farming, no pottery, no writing, not even the wheel. So how did a nomadic tribe of so-called primitive hunter-gatherers create a masterpiece of monumental architecture that modern science is still struggling to understand? And what else have we gotten terrifyingly wrong about our own past? For over a century, the blueprint for human history was considered settled science. The story began around 10,000 years ago with the Neolithic Revolution. Humans, tired of the constant hunt for food, finally discovered farming. This stable food source allowed them to settle in one place, leading to villages, then cities, and eventually the great civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt. In this official narrative, complex religion and massive temples were luxuries, the result of a settled agricultural life afforded by surplus grain and a population that stayed put. This was the undisputed gospel taught in every classroom. It made perfect sense. Survival comes first, culture comes second. But a ticking time bomb was waiting under a Turkish hillside, ready to shatter this entire paradigm. The discovery there suggests that maybe, just maybe, the primal urge to build, to worship, and to gather for a sacred purpose wasn't a consequence of civilization. It was the very spark that ignited it. Story begins with a colossal mistake. In the 1960s, archaeologists surveyed a prominent belly-shaped hill known locally as Göbekli Tepe. Seeing a few broken limestone slabs, they dismissed it as nothing more than an abandoned medieval cemetery. For another 30 years, the world's greatest archaeological secret slept on, undisturbed. That all changed in 1994, when a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt visited the site. He had worked in the region before and knew what the stone tools of the area's most ancient people looked like. Looking at the so-called headstones, he saw what everyone else had missed. These weren't random slabs. They were the tops of colossal T-shaped pillars that had been deliberately and painstakingly buried. Schmidt knew instantly this was no cemetery. It was something far older and infinitely more important. Excavations began a year later, and the world of archaeology was turned on its head. As Schmidt's team dug, an impossible structure emerged from the earth. Not one, but a whole series of massive circular enclosures. At the center of each ring stood a pair of giant T-shaped pillars, some reaching 18 feet high and weighing 50 tons. Surrounding them were smaller pillars, all integrated into expertly crafted stone walls. But it was the carvings that were truly breathtaking. The pillars were a prehistoric art gallery, a stone library of a lost world, covered in masterful reliefs of wild animals. Scorpions, boars, foxes, lions, and snakes writhe across the stone, each depicted with a stunning symbolic power. This wasn't primitive graffiti. It was a complex symbolic system, a message from our most distant ancestors. And the most baffling part? There was almost no sign of a permanent settlement. This wasn't a city for the living. It was built for something else entirely. Schmidt called it the world's first cathedral on a hill. The mysteries being unearthed at Göbekli Tepe are just the beginning. Entire chapters of the human story are being rediscovered. If you want to join us as we explore these lost chapters and challenge everything we think we know, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss what we find next. As the team dated the site using radiocarbon analysis, the story went from remarkable to reality bending. The results were staggering. The oldest layers of Göbekli Tepe date back to at least 9,500 BCE. That makes this temple 11,500 years old. Let that sink in. This temple was built 6,000 years before Stonehenge. It predates the invention of pottery, the written word, and the wheel by millennia. And most critically, it was built before the widespread adoption of agriculture. The builders of Göbekli Tepe were hunter-gatherers. This single fact detonated the established timeline of human history. The old model insisted that nomadic hunter-gatherers were incapable of the long-term planning, social hierarchy, and specialized labor needed for a project this massive. Quarrying, transporting, and erecting pillars weighing dozens of tons would require hundreds of organized workers, fed and housed for years. How could a society constantly on the move, with no farms to feed a workforce, pull this off? It was a historical impossibility, yet the evidence was right there, carved in limestone. Göbekli Tepe wasn't the product of a settled agricultural society. It was built before all of it. The existence of Göbekli Tepe forces us to ask a revolutionary question. What if we have the story of civilization completely upside down? What if it wasn't farming that led to religion and settlement, but the other way around? This is the radical temple-first theory. The sheer scale of the site suggests it was a major pilgrimage center for nomadic groups across hundreds of miles. The communal effort to build it would have forced different tribes to cooperate, organize, and develop a shared social structure. And crucially, that workforce had to eat. The intense, prolonged effort of construction may have been the very trigger for the agricultural revolution. To feed the hundreds of builders, our ancestors may have begun deliberately cultivating the wild grasses, the precursors to modern wheat that grew on the surrounding hills. In this new history, the spiritual quest for meaning was the spark. The need to sustain that quest led to farming. It seems the human desire to connect with the cosmos may have literally built the modern world. While definitive DNA evidence from human remains is still forthcoming, recent analysis suggests the entire complex might have been designed with a single, complex geometric plan, pointing to a level of sacred geometry and abstract thought that is simply astonishing for its time. For centuries, we have dreamed of lost civilizations like Atlantis, but this is not myth. This is a real, forgotten world, created by people far more sophisticated than we ever imagined. For a long time, Göbekli Tepe seemed like a 1 in a billion anomaly, but we now know it wasn't alone. The Turkish government has launched the Taş Tepeler project, or Stone Hills, investigating at least 12 similar sites in the region. One of them, Karahan Tepe, is just 60 kilometers away and dates to the same period. Excavations there have revealed more T-shaped pillars and a breathtaking 2.3-meter-tall human statue, one of the most powerful examples of prehistoric art ever found. This proves Göbekli Tepe wasn't a freak event. It was the epicenter of a vast and complex culture that dominated this region for thousands of years, only to vanish from history. This provides a stunning, factual basis for an idea long relegated to mythology, that highly advanced societies could rise, flourish, and then be completely forgotten. The world of these hunter-gatherers was clearly not primitive. It was a world of artists, engineers, and visionaries, whose story we are only now beginning to piece together. Göbekli Tepe is more than the world's oldest temple. It's a portal into a lost chapter of the human journey. It proves that over 11,000 years ago, our ancestors were not just struggling for survival. They were stargazers and engineers, driven by a need for meaning so powerful that it laid the foundations for our entire world. Then, around 8000 BCE, the entire site was deliberately and painstakingly buried, preserving its secrets for us to find. We still don't know why. Was it a dramatic change in beliefs? Or as agriculture finally took hold, was the temple that had birthed this new world simply no longer needed? We have excavated less than 10% of this enormous site. What awaits us in the other 90% could rewrite our story yet again. Göbekli Tepe proves there are chapters of our own history we never even knew existed. The question is no longer if our history books are wrong, but how much of the story is still buried beneath our feet.